Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. Today we're going to look at this hunk of metal, the Kizer and Elijah Isham collab, the Minitherium, which is a really interesting piece. So first things first, let's do some size comparisons. We've got the PM2, we've got the Para 3, and you will notice pretty quickly that the Minitherium is indeed mini. So there was a Megatherium, which a lot of people liked, but it was just a giant knife. I have not gotten a chance to handle that knife, but needless to say, this is indeed pretty small, about 3-inch blade-ish, and it's actually quite a bit shorter than the Para 3 in the handle department, which we'll get back to in a little bit, but it is indeed mini. I can confirm that is indeed the case. Weight-wise, another interesting aspect to this knife, we've got carbon fiber handles, which is very nicely done, and right at 3 ounces. So it's pretty much an inch, which is a good target to hit for sure. So let's jump into our dent, the decent, excellent, the nitpicks, and terrible of this hunk of metal. First things first, I do like this carbon fiber. The carbon fiber is a very clean look. As you can see, it's got the layers and it gives it almost that wood-like kind of aesthetic to it. Very clean, very nice, not very rough. I thought in pictures it looked a little bit worse than it does in real life, but this is very nice. I like it a lot. Next thing is this blue anodizing. So this is titanium backspacer, titanium clip, and I personally like this color combination. I think it's kind of classy, just gives it a little bit of a subtle something. I will say already on the clip there is some of the anodizing is wearing off pretty quickly, so in the long run I don't know if it's going to look that great, but as it stands right now, it does. The next thing I want to mention is the blade shape. So it's good old-fashioned Warren Cliff blade, and I like it. I think it's pretty, practical. It doesn't have much in the way of stabbing. It's not terrible. It's fine. And, blade stock-wise, it's actually a decent cutter. I was a little worried. I thought it might be a little bit thick from the spine and thick behind the edge, but it cuts decently well. It's not anything compared to my Spidey Chef in the cutting, slicing department, but still better than your average knife, I would say. The next thing I like is the opening aperture, which my favorite way to open a knife is always to flick it open. You do have a little flipper tab here, and if you do it just right, it does take some practicing, which we'll talk more about later. You could do it either way, and one of Elijah Isham's kind of signature things is when the flipper tab is kind of flush with the body of the knife, so it kind of disappears. Like if you were to see the knife open and somebody asked you, does it have a flipper tab, you probably wouldn't say yes, but it's kind of hidden. Which is cool, and it's also a little profile. When it's in your pocket, the flipper tab doesn't even get close to pecking anything. So I can say I like the placement and where it is. Not kind of mentioning the downsides, which we'll get to. So that's it. That's all I have for the decent. Moving on to the excellent, and I only have one excellent thing about this knife. Well, before I go to excellent, I will say I do like the packaging. The packaging is on point. It's got like this little wardrobe type affair with a pocket. This is really nice for a $200 knife. I gotta say I'm impressed. It's very classy and I like it. But anyway, so on to the excellent. We've got just kind of the distinctness of this knife. Elijah Isham really is a fantastic designer, and I think he, pulled it off with the Megatherium, and the Minitherium is no exception to that. It just looks cool. It's very like its own thing. It has personality, and it's just not a run-of-the-mill titanium frame lock knife that we've been seeing so much. So I do want to give it props where props is due, and that's in the design. I really do think this is unique and distinct and pleasing to the eye and relatively practical. You know, having your fingers out of the chopping path while you're cutting down is good. That's fine, you know. All right, so now let's talk about some nitpicks. Now, I'm going to start with the lightest of critiques here, and this is as a steel nerd, I'm a little bit over S35EN. It's a good steel. Like, I'm totally spoiled. I acknowledge this. But I kind of want something a little bit better. Like, I don't know. I would even take something that's not necessarily strictly better, but maybe is just more unique. Like, either go like the M4 route, which is just crazy, or, you know, S90V or S110V, something that's just a little bit more, I don't know, fancy than S35EN. The obvious candidate would be M390, but I think the knife would have to be quite a bit more expensive if they did that. S35 is having a hard time justifying the $200 price tag, not factoring in Sebenzas. Because then all of a sudden this knife looks great. But we'll pass over that. We're trying to judge it in its own kind of universe. The next thing, and this is just going to be totally dependent on you and your hands, the knife is too small. And I'm not surprised by that. It's called the Minitherium. It's not like false advertising. It is what it is. It's very small. And I have medium hands, and I thought maybe I could pull it off, but I just can't. My pinky doesn't get to live anywhere. When you choke up here, you would think, oh, that would give me more, room for my other fingers if I can move them up closer. But because of this height difference, it's super awkward to choke up any amount. Your hands, naturally, if I'm just going to choke up, they want to sit pretty much where they were before, and my pinky is still kind of dangling off. And so there's not really a difference in comfort, I feel like, between these two grips. Both cases make me feel like I'm using a child knife. So keep that in mind. Like, I'm somebody that likes small knives. Like, the Busker fits in my hand better than this knife does and is more comfortable to use, even though it has a shorter blade. Just to give you an idea of how short the handle is in the back and just how kind of awkward it is. If it came down a little bit so that it could keep my pinky on, but nothing is keeping it from just falling off. So, yeah. Next is just all this garbage on the blade. S35, I get that needs to be there. I still think you could have hidden that somewhere else. And then what the freak is this? K lowercase I 3502. I'm sure that's like the model number or something. But like, these are not lined up. They're not the same thickness. And then it's right next to this already ugly Kizer kind of logo. And it's just, so like if you're looking at it here, the words are just upside down, contributing to the gibberish factor. I really don't like that. This side is fine. You've got Elijah Isham's little thing in the name. Okay. It's on the back side. I'm more annoyed with all the stuff on the front. Anyway, again, remember, this is in my nitpick section. And then last nitpick is the acoustics, or the lack of acoustics. We'll get to that in a second. But if I rocket this sucker out best I can, that's about the best I can get. And it just doesn't sound good. You don't, even when you flick it, it has a sound of like, kink, I barely did it, boss. And I don't know, it's just kind of a dainty feeling, like not a big deal. And it has to do with the carbon fiber, but just something I mentioned. Some knives, when you open, and that just sounds great when you open it. It can add to it, like it's more than just cutting. Otherwise, we would just get one knife and be done. All right, so let's move into the terrible. And I've got 3 terrible things here. So first off, And I've been hearing this for most people that have this knife. I don't think it's like, oh, I just got a bad egg. I think this is pretty much just par for the course for this knife. The detent is a wet noodle. So two ways that we judge a flipper tab. You have the push button and you have the light switch. Let's try the push button. Okay. Well, maybe let's try it again. Okay. If I do it just right, again, I get that feeling of like barely the knife could open. More times than not, if you're not practicing and doing something that's specific for this knife, you are going to misfire. You hand this knife to somebody who's never handled it before, they're going to go in this little tiny, little wimpy deployment. And that's because the detent is basically non-existent. I can't shake it out. So this isn't in the unsafe category, but only just. It is in the frustrating to use, and then you think it locked up and it didn't lock up. That's another thing that I really don't like. So it will stop right here where it's gotten off, the detent ball has gotten off the metal, but it still hasn't locked up, which is just dangerous. So that's been like a huge issue. If I'm doing the flick open, I gotta really hammer it home. You can't really do push button. You have to do light switch, and you have to go really fast. And it's really awkward because when you're going really fast, your finger wants to sweep here, and it's bumping into this like little elbow. And so it's just not comfortable to like, because your finger is getting scraped on this every time. So I pretty much never use the flipper tab. The flipper tab is not fun to use. I don't like it. It's not reliable. So I pretty much always flick it open. And even then, you notice it like it's barely getting there. It feels like a really unhealthy person just like face planting on the finish line. All right. So next thing is this reverse detent. I don't know what to call it, but I'm going to call it reverse detent. So we've got this weak detent where it pops out very easily, right? And there's not a lot of like snappiness to it. And then I'm going to try to get in here as close as I can. So you see that ball. So it falls off the blade. And then the tang of the blade, if I was to close the knife, is ramming up against this. And it's very uncomfortable to do so. Basically what this knife needs is a detent ball ramp. If this had a detent ball ramp, it would make a world of difference. And why do I care? Well, if I'm trying to like close the blade, it rockets shut once that tension is broken. So it does this like guillotine finger chop thing where if the detent ball's there and I'm just pushing, karate chop. So what happens is you're trying to close the knife one-handed. You do this little thing where you get the lock bar off the tang of the blade, and then you don't want to, you want to shake the blade shut, but you can't. The reverse detent is so strong that the blade inevitably locks back up. You cannot like shake this loose. No matter what you do, it either pops back into place like that, or you put too much power and then kapow! There's no like, and the thing is, in between here is a very smooth action. But we never get to experience that action because on the way out, the detent is a wet noodle, and on the way in, it's like a finger guillotine. And so I never just get the buttery smooth of like, wow, it deploys nice, and then it can shut nice. This has reverse detent. I want it to have a much harder detent on the open, and then I want to be able to just get in there and kind of shake it shut. And it's an ordeal. I do not like playing with this knife at all. If you're a fidgety guy that likes, or girl that likes to, open and close your knife, this thing is just frustrating. You have to like concentrate on what you're doing, and when you're closing the knife, you have to like make sure it gets over that detent before you can shake it down and it has to go so far before it gets off that detent that I'm just doing one of these now. I'm just going kapow, which is like not fun or safe or interesting to do at all. All right, last terrible thing. This clip is garbage. I'm sorry, but it has no spring at all. There is like Oh, yeah. Yeah, listen to that. I get it up like a little bit. Pow! Yeah. Have fun trying to get this into your freaking pants. Oh my gosh. So you have your pants and then you cram your knife down and it just does not get in. Does not get in. So you have to come down here to the tip of the clip and lift it up to get your freaking pants into this clip. This is garbage. This alone, this by itself, I would not buy this knife. I would, if I could return it, I would return it. This is incredibly annoying. To top it off, this little spear that they've carved into this clip, that's where you have to lift the knife. There's no edge right here. I cannot get my finger down here on this side where there isn't a spear. So the only place I can lift this clip is right where it's stabbing me into my finger. Oh my God. It's like they made this clip to infuriate you. Oh my God. I am so annoyed. So yeah, I'm never going to carry this knife after the review because I can't get it into my effing pants. Oh my God.